Guys, welcome back to Southern Extreme TV. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Today, I've got an awesome video for you guys that I have been waiting a long time to do. We're going to be talking about my brand new thermal nighttime Coyote shotgun rig. That right there was a dang mouthful, but that is exactly what I'm talking about. It is a shotgun designed and built specifically for thermal nighttime coyote hunting. This has been a project that has been a very, very long time coming, mainly for a multitude of different reasons that I'll go into in a little more detail. But first of all, I want to talk about the reasoning behind, I guess, this build and where this idea came from. So for those of you that don't know us or know about Southern Extreme TV, we got started predator hunting, or I got started predator hunting basically with a shotgun, setting in pine thickets and cutovers and hardwoods at nighttime with a 12 gauge shotgun, double alt buck, and a flashlight taped to the end with one of the very first Fox Pro e-collars that ever came out, basically sitting in between my legs trying to call coyotes right up on top of us. And I love that. And what happened is we kind of transitioned from there to where, you know, I got out of school, got out of college, and got a job, saved up some money, and was able to purchase my first thermal. And then obviously, you know, the thermal imaging kind of grew from there. We hunted with a thermal imaging scope on a rifle for probably 5 years or so before we actually started producing full-length episodes specifically for YouTube. So the shotgun is very near and dear to my heart because it's something that basically got me started in the predator hunting world. Even though you guys from a production standpoint you've not seen that from the Southern Extreme TV side, other than 1 or 2 episodes that we produced last year in the testing phase of not this shotgun but another shotgun. So once the thermal kind of kicked up and started becoming the big, I guess, wild card in predator hunting success, I always had this idea of being able to put a thermal scope onto a shotgun and turning a shotgun into a awesome coyote slaying machine. However, the original ideas that I had probably 10 years ago, the market and the industry and the technology was just not there for us to be able to really do that. We were still using optics that either didn't have great image clarity, they did not have great field of view, they were big, bulky, heavy, and then on top of the fact, the internals were just not very rigid. They were not rugged, they were not built to hold up to the recoil that a lot of times you get out of a 12 gauge shotgun. And then there was just a multitude of other things that just wasn't on the industry or hadn't been developed until now. And that is kind of what has led me to this specific shotgun. And we started this off a while back. I've got a Remington 1187 that we did some trials with and learned kind of what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, mainly from the thermal side. And the first thermal that we tested out was a DNT Therm Night. It was a 640 resolution optic. That has a built-in daytime scope, built-in LRF for night vision. It is also a thermal, and it also has an LRF built in. Really fantastic scope for the money. However, the one negative that I did not like about it was how bulky it was. With the shotgun, you've already got a lot of added weight, mainly because you're going to be carrying a lot of extra shells, and I'll go into that reasoning here in a little bit. But the DNT Hydra Therm Night was just a little bit bigger, bulkier of a unit, something that I wasn't necessarily a fan of. And since then, we have transitioned now to the DNT Hydra, which is a very small, compact unit. It's very similar in size to a AR red dot magnifier. If those of you are familiar with, if you've got an AR, you've got a red dot, you can actually have magnifiers that flip over to the side or back in place. This is going to be very similar in size. It's going to be slightly bigger just because of the battery housing, but it's very similar in size to that, which is really, really nice. So we did some testing with the 1187 and the Thermite, really liked it, but knew there was a lot of things that we really needed to fine tune and tweak, if you will. And that's what kind of birthed this whole idea. We went from the Remington 1187, which is still a great shotgun. I still have that shotgun. It still has that Thermite mounted on it. Still capable of killing coyotes at night. But I knew I wanted to build something that checked all the boxes for me. And that's where kind of this birthed from. So let's go over briefly all of the build specs that's on this shotgun, because there's a lot of things that are going on with this shotgun, and I want to go into each individual item in a little detail just so you guys understand where I'm coming from, and then also understand the reasoning why I may have chosen these different parts and pieces. So for the shotgun itself, it is based off of a Beretta 1301 competition. And this is not the real short version. This is a 24-inch barrel, so it's not super short, but it's also not super long. And I like that size because it wasn't so short like your real tactical shotguns where the muzzle blast was just right on top of your face. It just allows for swinging the gun a little bit better and for those follow-up shots to be just a little bit smoother. So that 24-inch barrel was really perfect for this style shotgun. Now, the one thing that I do want to mention, the reason that we actually landed on the Beretta 1301 competition is because this is not an inertia-driven shotgun. The first shotgun that I tried to build, which was essentially going to look exactly like this, was done with a Stoeger M3000, and it basically looked exactly like this. However, the problem with an inertia shotgun is when you add too much weight on top of it, battery packs, shells, tube extensions, thermal optics, battery pack, all this stuff actually hurts an inertia shotgun. It basically enables the action to work. So what I ran into is I had this gun completely done up, completely made, but the gun wouldn't cycle. Even with 3-inch Magnum loads, I could not get the gun to cycle, and it's just because I had too much weight on that shotgun. So I had to go to a Beretta 1301, which was a gas operated gun, so that way the weight did not matter whatsoever. So landed on the Beretta 1301. I've been super thrilled with this shotgun and the trial running of it, shooting. Not had a single failure to feed, failure to shoot, failure to eject. The gun is 1000% in all the shells I've shot with it. So Beretta 1301 is the main shotgun that this build is done around. Starting from the left side, working to the back of the gun, we have two parts from Briley's Manufacturing. If you do not know who Briley's Manufacturing is, they make some of the coolest shotgun accessories out there on the market. So this tube extension is directly from Briley's. It has the sling swivel for your sling already built into it. It allows you to add some additional shells into this tube extension, which is a big deal if you get into a situation where maybe you're shooting 4, 5, 6 times at coyotes that are running all around you in some of those thicker cover areas. It's really nice being able to have that tube extension. The next thing, and to me probably the most important piece, other than probably the thermal optic on this shotgun, is going to be this handguard. This is a Briley's Manufacturing handguard, and what is unique about it is it has M-lock slots that are built all the way up and down this forearm or forend. And that's a big deal because it allows me to do things like add the battery pack, add these additional shell holders. It allows me to put an ARCA plate on the bottom. It allows you to do a lot of different things that a lot of predator hunters who are spending a lot amount of time out in the woods at nighttime behind a thermal optic, you have a lot of accessories that you're typically taking with you. And then especially with a shotgun, there's a lot of just extra nuances that you're going to be taking with you, and it's really nice having all these M-lock slots available. So Briley's Manufacturing tube extension, Briley's Manufacturing handguard. Back here at the back, I've already mentioned that we have the DNT Hydra. This is their 640 resolution model. The reason that I went with the 640 resolution, obviously number one, is for video production. The clarity with that 640 resolution is going to be better than the 384 or the 225. But the biggest reason is with the DNT lineup, The 640 resolution has a lower base magnification than the 384, and the 384 has a lower base magnification than the 225. Now, the reason that that is a big deal is if you hold your hands up and you imagine looking through a scope and only being able to see through a hole this size, or this size, you want that lower base magnification, because that wider field of view when you're shotgunning is a big deal, because very rarely are these animals coming in at 10, 15, 20 yards running through some thick cover and standing still. It's not like you're shooting a coyote or a fox or a bobcat out in the middle of a field at 150 to 200 yards where you get them to stop, take your time, and take an accurate shot. These is very, very quick shots, and you need that wide field of view to be able to not only get on them, but to stay on them and then potentially pick up other targets and put other shots down range. So 640 Hydra, very low base magnification. I think it's a 1.5 or a 2x base mag. Really been impressed with this D&T Hydra. Runs on 18650 batteries. Really, really impressed with this thing. The other reason why we went with the D&T Hydra is because the recoil rating of this thermal is rated up to a 50 BMG. So that was the real big thing that I had with some of the other thermals, like I mentioned earlier, was my concern with the internals. Number one, being able to hold zero, and number two, just being able to keep all of the electronics together and not just falling apart and breaking like some of those older, cheaper units could have done. So that was a big reason why we went with the D&T Hydra as well. Moving back to the stock, obviously this is a very different looking butt stock for a shotgun. It's going to be very traditional to an AR style look. This is actually made by a company called Chisel Machining. And when I first heard about Chisel Machining, they're highly regarded on the tactical side of things. Obviously this is a very short length of pull. You've got your pistol grip on here. Everything is just very tactical oriented. The one reason, or there's actually two reasons that I really like this Chisel Machining stock. Number one is the weight reduction, because we've got a lot of stuff going on with this shotgun, so it's a heavy shotgun. Weight reduction is number one. Number two is I can put any AR style grip on this Chisel Machining butt stock. And the reason that that's a big deal is me and Guffey spend a whole lot of time behind our Night Stalker Precision AR rifles, and we both run these Hogue grips. So being able to have the exact same grip on this shotgun that is on our AR, it feels very, very comfortable when we're out in the field and we're running this shotgun at nighttime. So those two things are a really big deal. But then the third thing is the length of pull. This Chisel Machining allows you to get a super short length of pull. I think you can get almost 11 inches. Now, a lot of you guys may say, well, why do you need such a short length of pull on this shotgun? And the reason behind it is because of the eye relief that you have with thermal optics. That's another reason why it has taken us all the way until now to be able to really put the perfect shotgun together, because a lot of thermals way back when, you had to have your eye, and even some of them nowadays, you still have to have your eye almost all the way up against that optic. Whereas with this Hydra, your eye relief is a lot better, but it's still not as good as like a normal daytime scope. And the problem with shotguns is their length of pulls are typically around that 12 or 13, even 14 inch mark. And what you run into is it's very hard to get your face close enough to this thermal optic for you to get that full sight picture, because the length of pull is so daggum long. So the fact that with this Chisel Machining, you're able to have the adjustment. So if you're somebody with longer arms, you can adjust this out, I think all the way from like 11.5 all the way out to 14 or 15 inches. So you have that happy medium of being able to make it work for your length of pull. But if you're just an average stature like me, 5'10", 5'11", and you really need that shorter length of pull, this Chisel Machining gave me the shortest length of pull option on the market, but it also had a lot of other great benefits to it as well. So really appreciate them seeing, you know, what we were wanting to do with this project. Chisel Machining as well as Briley Manufacturing, they come together, heard what I was wanting to do, and we all chipped in together, and basically that's what we did to build this shotgun. So Really cool all-in build. Let's talk about the ammo and the choke tube. I think that's the two things that I left out. The ammunition is one thing that I was slightly ignorant on, and I'm just going to be honest with you guys, because growing up, like I mentioned, when we first started, we were using double-aught buckshot, and we got away with it. We killed a lot of coyotes with double-aught buck, but again, we were shooting coyotes typically in that 15 to 20 yard range, which you don't really see that much of a difference in that buckshot and any other round that's out there at that distance. But with these thermal optics, you're able to take and shoot at coyotes in the thicker cover at longer distances than you are typically with a flashlight that's taped on the side. So that's where I reached out to Foxtrot Ammunition, and they love what we were trying to do. They have been manufacturing TSS shot shells for predator specific guys for some time. Obviously they are typically running 3-inch shells in either a number 3 shot or a number 4 shot, in which I did a pattern test with this shotgun, and it liked the number 4s substantially better. He did recommend, Bryce actually recommended with Foxtrot, to run the Indian Creek choke tube, which is what we've got on the end of this. And it is a dream shooter. This thing is shooting really, really well at 50 and 60 yards with the 3-inch shells. The one thing that I was, again, slightly nervous about was the recoil from the 3-inch TSS rounds. I was worried about it being too much with the D&T Hydra, and it's not. The D&T Hydra has held up very, very well during all my pattern testings with these 3-inch number 4s. However, in talking with Bryce and about what we were going to be doing with this project and Foxtrot, we wanted to offer a 2 3/4 shell as well. A lot of guys that are going to be using these shotguns, maybe your maximum distance is going to be 40 to 50 yards. If that's the case, you can actually save a little bit of money and not buy the 3-inch shells, and you can buy the 2 3/4 shells. And what that's going to do is it's going to save you money. It's going to save you on felt recoil, because there is a substantial difference between a 3-inch TSS and a 2 3/4 TSS. And then number 3 is your wear and tear on your thermal optic. Even though this D&T is held up fantastic, it's rated to a 50 BMG. Maybe you don't have a D&T Hydra. Maybe you've got another thermal optic laying around. Maybe you're not so sure that it's able to withstand a 3-inch Magnum. Foxtrot Ammo manufactures 2 3/4 shells, and I'm calling them their thermal rated rounds. It's not really that. It's really just their Coyote Fever shotgun shell or TSS loads in a 2 3/4 versus a 3-inch. But a lot of you guys are probably going to really like those 2 3/4 over the 3-inch shells, because if you're like me and Guff, I know some of the people frown upon this, but if we're hunting a field that is 60 yards wide, or we're hunting openings that are 60 yards wide but maybe 40 yards wide, we're typically running our Night Stalker Precision 6.5 Creedmoors. And a lot of people kind of cringe at the thought of being in an area or a field with that small of a window. But here where we're at, we hunt a lot of smaller fields, and that's not the size field that we would be running a shotgun on. And in fact, for us running a shotgun, we're going to be in trees and thickets like you see back here behind me. And we're actually going to be trying to call these coyotes in to like 15, 20, 30 yards. So trying to shoot a coyote at 60, 70, 80, 90 yards, like I've heard some stories of these TSS from Foxtrot being able to do, is not necessarily something that we're going to be doing, even though this shotgun is going to be very, very capable of taking down a coyote with these 3-inch number 4s at those 70, 80 yard distances. Obviously, a lot of things have got to go right for that to happen, but it is very, very doable. Really awesome project that we were able to put together. I do want to mention, because I know a lot of you guys are seeing this on a tripod, and the majority of people who are thinking of coyote shotgunning are thinking about sitting down up against a tree or setting down into some cover, very similar to the way that you would turkey hunt, and basically calling them in, and then you're free to move. However, there's 2 negatives that I have found with that so far. The first negative is your visibility. So everybody knows The lower you get to the ground, the harder it is to see certain animals. And if you're a turkey hunter, you know this firsthand. There has been so many turkeys that have lived to tell another day because you're setting on the ground. And if you could have been 5-6 foot up in the air, you could have very easily killed that turkey. Well, the same exact scenario goes for predator hunting. So my thought process behind this was I wanted something that I could be vertical, where I could be standing up behind this shotgun, which would get me 3 to 4 foot of additional elevation over somebody sitting on the ground. So now my visibility is way better. But the problem with that is I needed something to hold my shotgun, not necessarily because I couldn't hold it, but because I want to be able to run my Fox Pro remote, whereas Guffey, he's not really concerned about anything other than shooting a coyote. He could stand there and pretty much scan the entire time while he was holding a shotgun, but it's very difficult to hold a shotgun, stand up, and work the remote of a Fox Pro all at the same time without having an ARCA plate or having the ability for a tripod to hold your shotgun. Now, the reason that having a Fat Boy or a similar style head on your tripod is important is because there's a very simple throw lever that allows you to take the shotgun straight off. So if I get into a situation where I'm standing up and I'm scanning and I'm looking for a coyote, and maybe Guffey's on my right hand side and I have a coyote that's coming very, very hard left. Typically in these situations where we're hunting, you can hear these coyotes before you can see them, because again, we're not hunting and using this in fields. We're using this in thicker cover typically. So I can hear the coyote coming, I hit my throw lever, and now I'm up and going, because by that time, that coyote has typically already committed hard enough that he is coming to that Fox Pro, wherever it may be at. He's coming in for that fight, he's coming in for that rabbit, he's coming in for that breeding sound, whatever it may be, you have got that coyote at that point committed. So the ability to take this off, spin, and put a shot on that coyote is a very big deal, because now what that does is it opens up all of this terrain around me, obviously within reason of my hunting partner. If you're by yourself, then you've got 360 degrees that you can shoot. If you're with your partner, you typically got about 180 degrees from straight in front of you to straight behind you that I can now cover. Guffey can cover the other side. But the ability to have that quick release lever, have a hands-free situation to where I can focus on running my remote, my shotgun's at the ready, it's ready to roll and take a shot, that's a very big deal. The one thing that I did have to do was I had to modify the Fat Boy screws, because you've got a lot of mechanisms and moving parts inside or under this handguard from Briley's. The screws were slightly high for the M-LOK ports. So I actually had to take a Dremel down the screws that came from Fat Boy, because this is a Fat Boy ARCA plate. Now another ARCA plate might be slightly different and the screws may be shorter to where you don't have to make that modification. But on this one, I specifically had to make that modification, which wasn't a big deal. But now the gun runs 1000%, whether it's mounted to the tripod or whether it's off the tripod. So that right there checked every single box that I could possibly check for a coyote specific thermal shotgun. There's a thermal that's mounted on it full time. It lives on this shotgun. It's not ever going to come off this shotgun. I've got the 3-inch or the 2 3/4 TSS from Foxtrot Ammo. I can shoot coyotes at 50, 60, 70 yards all day long, but I've got a good enough pattern out of this Indian Creek that I am able to shoot coyotes all the way into 10 yards and feel very, very confident about it. Right now, the only negative that I've got with this shotgun build is going to be the weight. Obviously, by the time you add battery packs, thermal, tube extension, and mainly the shells, all the shells are going to be the biggest thing that is going to weigh this puppy down. Now, some of you guys may be asking me, okay, well, is it really necessary for you to have a full tube extension plus 6 additional rounds out here on the handguard? And the answer to that is the additional 6 is probably a little overkill. However, if you went and watched our episode where we actually went coyote hunting with a thermal shotgun, that Remington 1187 actually had a tube extension where I had 7 rounds in that gun, and me and Guffey actually ran out of bullets. I had no shells. Guffey ran out of bullets. He was running his 6.5 Creedmoor. I ran out of shells and actually had to run back to our side-by-side, get additional shells, come back, load it up, and actually finish one of the coyotes off. And being in that situation, especially with it being the very first time that we went out, made me realize that carrying as many shells as I could possibly carry comfortably was a very big deal. And the most comfortable way that I found to carry those shells is obviously a long tube extension, but then also just these little 12 gauge 3D printed M-LOK holsters that you can buy off of Amazon. I think there's a lot of manufacturers that are 3D printing this stuff. They do a really good job of holding these shells, and I bought 2 of them so I could put 3 on this side, 3 on that side. It does a really good job of balancing this shotgun out. But it does add a tremendous amount of weight to this shotgun. I have not put in an actual scale to this gun, but if I was a betting man, completely loaded down with shells, battery pack, thermal scope on here, my guess is this gun's gonna come in right around that 10 to 11 pound range. So for those of you guys that are used to running a AR-10 platform with a fully loaded 20 or 30 round magazine with a suppressor on the end, this shotgun is going to feel very, very similar to that. Now, if you've been running a carbon fiber build like a Night Stalker Precision on an AR-15 or even an AR-10 platform, this gun's going to feel a little bit heavier than what that gun feels like in your hands. But it's not so bad that it is unbearable to carry in and out of the woods and walk substantial distances to get back into that thicker cover. So I think it's going to check all the boxes. As of right now, the weight would be the only negative that I've got, but to counter that negative, the added weight or the additional weight of this shotgun is going to help mitigate recoil. Not only does the weight help mitigate recoil, but it being mounted to this fat boy tripod also helps mitigate recoil as well. So all those things, all of those little nuances all tie in to what I personally believe is the ultimate and best high-end thermal shotgun build that I have ever seen. This is something that I dreamt up years and years ago, but until today, 2025, it took until then for us to be able to actually put together, in my opinion, what is the most perfect shotgun, thermal shotgun for predators that's ever been created. So that's just my personal opinion. I'm a little biased, but hopefully the thought process and the rationale behind what I did and why I did will help you guys understand, and maybe will help you narrow down your search as far as exactly what you're going to do with your next, either your next shotgun thermal build, or maybe you're just wanting to get into the thermal shotgun world because a lot of states you're only allowed to use a shotgun. This is a great way to do it. So if I didn't cover anything in today's video, drop a comment down below. I'll try to answer any questions that y'all might have. We're gonna not do a pattern test today just because this was kind of a lengthy, in-depth review of exactly what this shotgun was. We'll do a pattern test later on where we actually got a little bit better conditions, because as you can tell, it's actually raining on me right now. So I want to do the thermal justice, and I want to be able to actually enjoy going out here and shooting the gun. So again, if there's any questions or anything that I didn't go over, drop a comment down below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because we're trying to grow this channel as big as we can. And as always, if you're looking for a thermal optic like this DNT Hydra, go over to Southern Precision Outdoors. We've got a code SETV that you can use, or you can just reach directly out to Shane, let him know you've seen today's video. He's got all the build specs for this gun specifically, as well as this optic, so he can get you set up and going in that right direction. So thank you guys for hanging out with me. I will see y'all in the next episode.